Yep. All right, let's jump in today. All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to lunch and welcome to the Relationship Series Season 3, episode number 3. I'm your host, Genevieve. You guys know me and excited to be here once again today for another transformational conversation. Y'all know what we do here. We do the work, we heal for real, and we sow what we want to grow. Um, and at the end of the day, we revolutionize our relationships. And that's the whole point of being here at any point in time on any Thursday at 12 o'clock or 1 o'clock or whatever time. Um, so, y'all know me, I'm not an expert. I'm a therapist. I'm passionate about relationships. And I believe any time spent talking about relationships is time well spent. I struggle in relationships just like the rest of us. But of course, we do our best to talk in a way that brings us to a place where we are better at the end of the day. So today I'm going to get out of our way and we are going to welcome a friend and special guest to talk to us today about our topic, which is work spouses. I've gotten a lot of feedback, a lot of comments and questions about this. So excited to jump in. Our special guest today is Jamie Sutherland. He is a friend and colleague, a fellow registered psychotherapist, and he will be delving deeper into this topic today. It will be a lot of fun. As usual, we welcome your feedback, we welcome your input, we welcome your everything, your anything, your comments and your stories, and so you're free to post in the chat, put up your hand at any point, and share with us about how the information is resonating with you. So without further ado, I think we're about 5 minutes in. So I'm going to turn it over to Jamie. We are going to welcome you. He's going to say a few more things about himself. And then we're going to jump all the way in. Jamie, welcome. Thank you so much for being here for our relationship series and another transformational conversation. Lead us where you want us to go.
Jen, thank you so much. Thank you for that very, very warm welcome. I hope everybody can hear me and see me okay. I hope I'm not too close to the screen because that's always a concern of mine. Don't need to get too close and personal, but I hope that everything is good. I just want to extend a thank you to Jen and Corner Counselor for allowing and presenting this opportunity to speak a little bit today about work spouses. We'll see how it goes. The way I do things is I try to be a little interactive. So please post stuff in the comments. If there's a particular topic, sentence, phrase, anything that stands out for you, just jump in. Just put your hand up. I believe Jen's monitoring the text as well, and then we can kind of like add to something. I'm taking this as try to take it as unbiased as possible, even though I have my own convictions about it. And I will disclose before I share a little bit about myself. When I was in my early 20s, I had a couple work spouses. I didn't know it was a thing. Do you know what I mean? But I do recognize that, hey, when you're working together in certain professions, whether it could be self help, whether it could be caring professions, anything where you spend long periods of time, where there could be situations that involve crisis, could involve very deep and intimate situations. It's very easy to develop these relationships quickly. Okay. So, a little about myself as we are going through the minutes. My name is Jamie Sutherland. I'm a registered psychotherapist, a family and marriage therapist, registered in Ontario and in Alberta, registered across Canada. I am husband in a blended family. We got 5 children all together, so that's a little busy. They're all adults, so it's busy in a different way. Um, but that's a little bit about myself. Just for context, I want to say a very important part of my life. Grew up in Jane and Finch. For those who know the city of Toronto, if you're elsewhere in the world online, it's a very special part of the city for me. And it speaks to just my childhood and a little bit about who I am. So I won't go into too much detail about that, but I will definitely jump in. So, talking about work spouses today. So, once again, if you got questions, comments, throw it in the chat or please just jump in, okay? Next slide. If I can get to the next slide. Something's going on here. All right, let's see what we got next. All right, so we'll start off with the agenda. So what we're going to do is we're going to open up by, hey, what makes this presentation, the session of keeping it real, real relationships for you. We'll go through a couple key terms. I want to get to know who's in the room as well. Nothing too significant, just get a sense of where you're at. We're going to try to define work spouses. We're going to talk about how relationships develop. I think when we're talking about work spouses, we're really talking about boundaries. We're talking about attachment needs, which I'll get into, talking a little bit about our own histories and the other person's history, and then just practical steps. There is a spelling error there. I do recognize that. I do apologize, but that's okay. These things do happen. So moving along, moving along. All right, so some key terms we're going to highlight today. Work spouses, because I mean, that's what we're talking about. Boundaries, as mentioned, infidelity, and a little bit about what infidelity could be or might be. Talk about attachment. We're going to talk about beliefs and value systems. We're going to talk about the power of emotions, unhelpful patterns, hurts and hangups, culture, and the neurochemistry of love and connection. So this is what will be some of the keywords for today. If you have any questions so far, once again, please feel free to throw it up in the chat. Also, I forgot to mention, if you are in your car, because I can't see everybody's screen, or somewhere that you are not safe, please pull over. Be safe, first and foremost, as we go through the presentation, okay? And if anything happens in case of an emergency, please put your location, phone number, whatever in the chat, so that way we can best help as fit, okay? Cool, moving along. Next slide. So this is for you if. This is for you if you have been or know someone who has been or had an experience with a work partner. So we're looking for a little vulnerability, if that's all right. If you have questions about boundaries, if you have questions about thoughts of infidelity and what that consists of, if you want to better understand how to make helpful choices based on your own values, or if you want to examine your own beliefs. Okay. Moving along. Getting to know you. So this is where I want to get to know who's in the room. Cool. So let's see. We want to put up gender, age, what you do for a living. You don't got to put your name. Just some things you can take your mic off. You can kind of put it out there in the world, but just to get a sense of who's in the room. So I'll leave it open for a couple seconds. Anybody wants to be bold and take a risk and just do a bit of a shout out? What do you do for a living? What's your age? Gender, ethnicity, please put it out there. Even if you want to put it in the chat, that's all right too. As I said, I shared a little bit about myself. Clearly, I am male. I identify as male. My family's from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Had an opportunity of growing up there and in Canada. Uh, Father of 5, blended family. Please share. Jen, I don't know if you got anything in the comments or the chat. It looks like we have two. We got gender female, ethnicity black, work therapist. Thank you. We got female 42. Looks like medical admin. Thank you so much. Anybody else? Doesn't look like we got anything else for now. So what I will do is I will move on. But if you do have, oh, we got female 30 account, Belize. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. All right.
Hail up, Belize.
Yes, if there's if there is anyone else who wants to add, please feel free to, okay? What I will do is I will move on. All right, we got 33, Black male mix, systems administrator. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. All right, we will move on. All right, so work spouse. What does work spouse imply? Well, we're actually going to start with spouse. So, what does a spouse imply? So, doing a little bit of research and then, pulling on my own personal beliefs, what we kind of came up with in terms of what what spouse implies is that a spouse is something that's contractual, definitely agreement between two people. Definitely, we consider it as a union, something that is viewed under the law, whether it's spiritual or legal. A spouse connotes permanence, usually permanence for life, right? Usually there's financial support included. They are sexually united. They are emotionally attached, there to support each other. It's an exclusionary process. It means it only involves the people that are involved in that union. Okay? It's also a public declaration of love and commitments. And it's verbally spoken words because we know that words are very performative. So, sorry about that. So, we'll move on to what a work spouse implies. A work spouse implies maybe possibly sharing time, maybe sharing in some deep emotional connections, maybe being supportive. Once again, sharing time because I put it down twice. Clearly, I wasn't looking there. Um, Developing strong emotional attachments, could be defined by environmental factors or situational factors, which could be very different from a spouse, right? When you think about it on the whole, right? Work spouse could be a meeting some emotional needs or some spiritual needs. Sometimes with these work spouse relationships, they are sexually active together, right? Sometimes they can get into a little bit of trouble in terms of finding a unified definition of what that relationship is. And a work spouse is definitely a dual relationship. And I think that's a very important fact here, right? It's a relationship that doesn't have the same level of maybe transparency in the public world or the public view or public setting as does a spouse. All right. If there's any questions, please feel free. I'm just trying to read the chat as well. All right, I got a therapist online. Grandma, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Moving on to the next slide. All right, how do relationships develop? Well, most relationships develop the same way. They do need a mixture of things. I want to call it, the perfect recipe of things coming together. But what I want you to do in this moment is think back to, when you met either your wife, your first love, a special partner. Think about how that came together and think of these components were part of it. A little bit of time, a little bit of proximity, a little bit of closeness. You're seeing the person regularly at the same place and time, shared interests, like doing certain things together, whether it's reading, playing video games, going for coffee, going for walks, drives, the movies, whatever you want to call it. Then there's definitely an attraction, whether it's emotional, you know, there to support each other through difficult times. Maybe you share the same belief systems, the same cognitions. You look at the world in a similar way, right? Maybe there's a spiritual component to it as well, in terms of how you view the world on a spiritual level. What are your views on God? What are your views on the universe? If you subscribe to that, right? And on a behavioral level, maybe just doing some of the similar activities. Well, how does a work spouse develop? Guess what? Please see above, right? In a very similar way. I will move on to the next slide if there's no questions. All right, doesn't look like we have any. All right, so how does or might a work spouse help you or not help you? As I shared before, I'm going to try to be as unbiased as possible. That's why I'm hoping people will share their thoughts, their convictions about this topic. Sorry about that for stumbling there. How is this relationship helpful? Well, guess what? It might make you feel good about yourself, might make you feel better, might make you do better at what you do at work or home, which is kind of interesting because it does parallel a little bit about addictions. Addictions kind of operate on the same line, whether it's something substance or behavioral. someone who might just listen to you, someone who's non-judgmental, someone who provides companionship. If you are a single person, but even if you are in a marriage or you do have a spouse, that work spouse can provide companionship as well. How is this unhelpful? Well, might be a bit of a distraction. You might be at home thinking about the work spouse, might pick up your phone and send a text message or, post something on IG or Snapchat or whatever platform of social media you use. I'm not very good with social media, so I'm just putting some random things out there that I know. Might impact your ability to focus on other meaningful relationships because, the sun is out and food tastes better and, you just feel lighter inside because I got that warm, fuzzy feeling. Might be, might be a bit of a distraction. You know, you actually might be inviting yourself to hurt somebody else. That's another part of it, right? Causing a bit of emotional pain, how it might be unhelpful, depending on if we are thinking about the larger system and the parties who might be involved in this relationship, maybe the casualties, the potential to blur boundaries in terms of what's shared, what's not shared, in terms of how we spend our time, um, whether it's at home or out in the community or with our families. It might reinforce old habits of past relationships. I don't know, maybe the current situation started, this way as a work spouse and things continue and another work spouse develops. I'm not sure. Maybe what happens is, we were in past relationships and we've invited somebody else in, right? Which could be a similar pattern to a work spouse, right? So it could disrupt a current relationship. It could prevent an individual from learning to assert their boundaries and problem solve and self regulate because the work spouse comes in and says, hey, you know what? I got you. I can listen. I can be there for you. But then what happens is we don't develop those skills for ourselves, right? In order to actually sit in our emotional pain and make sense of it, right? It might be pushing someone out of their comfort zone due to power imbalances or dynamics at the office. If you're a male or, female and, you want a promotion or, that's kind of like an unconscious process, or I can't necessarily assert myself and say no or say yes. So we got to factor in the power imbalance as well and the potential to make the work environment unsafe because the reality is, relationships have ebbs and flows. Some of the greatest relationships have a lot of ebbs and flows. And I'm not talking about super unhurtful. I'm just saying moments of disagreeing. But then if I'm with my work spouse and I got my spouse at home and all of a sudden there's a disagreement, what happens to that environment? What happens to your level of productivity? What happens to the larger system at work? Because people are probably aware of what's going on. Did you see so and so talking to so and so? Did you see how this took place? They left the office together. But those dynamics play out also on a larger system. And if you're somebody who's single, who has a work spouse, you got to go back into that environment. So if you were feeling at home like, oh my gosh, you know what I mean? I got this wonderful person and, the work environment is just lighter and all of a sudden there's conflict, then I got to step back into that role. Now home and work becomes difficult. So I guess you can hear a little bit of my bias as I'm kind of going through this, right? I'll try to remain as unbiased as possible, okay? I'm about healthy relationships, as Jen's talking about real relationships. So I'll continue and move on to the next slide. But if anybody has any questions, feel free. Once again, I'm going to keep saying that. We got a comment. Oh, I never thought about the connection between work spouses and addiction. Definitely. Sometimes we develop relationships, and we'll talk about this later. Is that love can be a bit of a chemical high, right? And it could be something that we chase, but actually feeling good can also be a bit of a chemical high from my biased experience. So when we're talking about feel good, feeling good in the moment, feel better overall on the long term, do better, start performing in different ways, right? All of a sudden I hand in my things on my portfolio at work or, the deliverables and I'm meeting the deadlines and the details, right? Can definitely have an impact. So I'll move on to the next slide. Funny enough, chemical love. So the neurochemistry of love. Here's a question. How long, I mean, I got the answer up there, but you can read it if you want. But for your own experience without the answer, how long did you think or would you think that chemical love lasts for? What do you think? Just put an answer out there. There's the answers out there, but just, before you read it, how long would you have thought it lasts for? Somebody says 90 days. All right, 90 days of, dopamine rush. And those synapses that are connecting and the neurons firing. I see some people smiling. Someone else, how long do you think that? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. All right. We are underscoring this significantly. Anybody else? How long did you think? Oh, sorry, Jen is saying something. I got an LOL.
I think 3 years.
38.
Is it
Three.
under 3 years?
Yeah,
Like
it's
3 years
actually
or under?
it's 6 months to 2 years.
Okay, yes, yes. I heard something about like under 3 years or something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So 6 months to 2 years. And essentially what happens is love takes a different form. And love falls into safety and consistency and predictability and routine. And there's nothing wrong with that because that safety comes with a lack of anxiety because we are just going through the stages of a relationship, right? Which are going to change and evolve depending on how long you've been with your partner. That's why marriages are developmental, right? So when we hear people say, oh my gosh, I want that feeling that I had when we first met. Well, is it going to really come back? Probably not. And that's the reality. Can we do things to create excitement and spice it up? Most definitely. 100% as well. So, why is this important? Perspective is important. Um, a long time ago, someone once said to me, you believe what you perceive, right? And if we believe that our emotions and our feelings and our thoughts and our spiritual sense with our partner can evolve and change, then it puts things in perspective when we're talking about developing a relationship at work or even developing a relationship outside of work, even though we're talking about work spouses. Okay? So, questions, just trying to create some space. We got marriage is developmental. Thank you. We will move on. All right, work spouses, the psychological needs. Well, we all have psychological needs. We all have attachment needs, which we'll get into in another slide. But we all have needs for love and for safety and for security and trust and connection and honesty and reciprocity and sex and intimacy. And what we've put here on the right-hand side is basically Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So if those of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, just basically call this a refresher, okay? For those of you who are new, basically what happens with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, it goes from physical to psychological, right? So, basic needs, food, shelter, water, warmth, etc. And then what happens in the green and I guess that's kind of like an orangish yellow color, what happens is it ends up talking about relationship needs, more psychological needs. And this is where the work spouses can play a significant role. This is where our spouses play a significant role or our partners play a significant role. Okay. So we want to factor in that, hey, you know what? Not only are these needs, they're actually also motivations. They're things that will drive us towards something, right? So if my work spouse is meeting any of these psychological or psychosocial needs on the side, you know, it's probably a big indication to say, hey, I got to ask myself, what am I missing at home? Right? Or what am I missing in that primary relationship? But then we got to take it a step further, which we'll get to, is we got to ask ourselves, where's this coming from? Right? So if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask or jump in. Sorry, my slides did something weird there. So I'm just trying to organize this so I can see my presentation. All right, moving on. Oh, let me see, I might have missed something there, guys. Forgive me. Oh, yes, the question. So what do they offer me? What do I need? And what do I offer them are three things that you can ask yourself. All right. We said in the beginning, we'll talk a little bit about boundaries. Boundaries are definitely important, and there's many different types of boundaries, whether it comes to time, whether it comes to sex, whether it comes to physical, whether it comes to relational, emotional, physical, financial, spiritual. But when we're talking about work spouses, we're talking about healthy boundaries that are what I want to say might be governed by the organization or profession, because we're talking about conduct. but also how that intersects with our own personal boundaries when we're outside in the community, right? So what I want to say is boundaries of self-knowledge as well. How are my personal boundaries being preserved, sorry, in terms of how I know myself and what's important to me? You know, am I, a statement that came to me last night is, can I ask for something that I'm not offering myself? So if I have a work spouse and, I'm trying to show them that they can trust me, well, can I really offer that trust? Right? These are things I have to ask myself. Am I reinforcing this boundary of trust with this other person and then with my partner? Right? If you're somebody that's single, maybe the question I'm asking myself is, can I trust this person because of what they might be experiencing in their external system? Because I don't know their context as well, right? Another question to ask yourself when it comes to self knowledge is, am I aware of my consequences, whether it's short or long term? And how do I preserve that boundary? Am I being kind to myself or kind to those around me in terms of what I'm doing, right? Self acceptance, is this cool to do overall? Really reflecting on the impact on self and then on others. If you turn your attention to the left of the screen, you'll see that there's different types of boundaries there. We have a diffused set of boundaries, rigid, enmeshed, and differentiated. And I'll break them down. So essentially, diffused boundaries are boundaries that are super permeable. What happens is, I'll put it in the context of a family. Nobody moves unless auntie, uncle, cousin, sister, brother, mom, dad, grandma, everybody knows what we're doing. There's no boundaries, it's diffused. So there's no sense of privacy. There's no sense of right? Is this something that's showing up in the workplace? Am I having diffused boundaries? Are my boundaries so rigid that in a family, the only thing that exists is I? In other words, maybe I'm not sharing with family, I only operate alone. Nobody in my family really knows much about me, or within my relationship, I'm maybe closed off. So within rigid boundaries, the only thing that exists is I. With the mesh boundaries, we think of like, if you put your hands together and lock them, it's just they're kind of connected and intertwined in a very unhealthy way. It's almost like there is a codependency on the other person. I'll use the word codependency loosely, or a dependency on the other person to help self-regulate or stay connected. In other words, I can't be without you, whether it's healthy or unhealthy. Okay. And then differentiated, this is where we want to be. The way I conceptualize differentiated in terms of boundaries is, we are always arriving, we never arrive. But essentially, I'm not trying to convert you on my beliefs or values or trying to get you to do or believe what I say. I'm cool with me being me, and I'm cool with you being you. And that would be something more differentiated. So I put these out there as a challenge, that if you are somebody with a work spouse, reflect on, what boundaries are showing up, right? Is my goal to be more differentiated? I'm not sure, right? Maybe it is enmeshment because of things from my past, right? Maybe there is only us because that's something I was brought up with culturally, and just the more the merrier, right? Or am I being so closed off that I'm only thinking about me in this circumstance? I don't know if we have comments. It looks like we got 6 in the chat. Just trying to see what's there. Cool. Can I ask for something I cannot give? Thank you for putting that down. Am I aware of the consequences? And we're always arriving, yet we never arrive. Thank you. If there's any questions, once again, please throw it up in the chat. Moving on to the next slide. I'm a bit of a nerd, guys. I got to put it out there. So that's the Riddler, asking himself a question. Is this infidelity? Right? Can a work spouse be an emotional affair? Right? Are my work spouse or spouses, if there's plural, are they meeting some type of emotional need? Am I so connected that I am disconnected from my spouse or from my partner? Just question to ask yourself. With infidelity, am I breaking any contracts with this relationship? Am I breaking a covenant between me and my partner? Me and my spouse, whether it's legally or spiritually. Has this been spoken about? Is everything on the table? Does spouse know all of my cards? Does work spouse know all of the cards? I'm not sure. But I think what it comes down to with this legal infidelity is, what are the rules that govern your relationship? And how do those show up, whether it's with their work spouse or not? Some couples might be like, hey, I'm really cool if you have a work spouse because then I don't have to deal with you at home. I don't have to deal with that part of you. That's a real thing. And it does show up. Some partners are like, hey, I don't care if my partner's sleeping with somebody else as long as I know who they are. And I know that it's safe. Rules of the relationship. I'm personally not going to subscribe to that. Just put myself out there. But it
I have a
depends on.
question just about that, just surrounding that.
Jump in, please.
Um, okay, do you think that's true? Like the idea that yes, my partner can just be with whoever else they want to if I know them, or is it like settling on some level
Mm.
or accepting on some level? I've always thought of this when it comes to like open relationships. I always wonder, like, is that really how you feel? Like, if you really had another option or felt you had another option, would you choose that? Or do you really value, like, this freedom of being with other people? Anyway, it was just a thought. I'm like, is that I don't know. Anyway,
No, I,
okay, it might be off
no,
topic. It was just a random thought. Go ahead, go ahead.
no, I think that is a very reflective question. I would pose it to the audience if you want to like stop here and reflect on the question that Jen had asked. Like, is this true? Like, am I settling? Is it the freedom that I enjoy? Is there something about this relationship that just drives me if I understood Jen's question correctly? But if we can open it up, you're more than welcome to. Or we definitely can. But please, if you want a moment to, open your mic and share your thoughts, we'll pause here for a moment.
To be quite honest, I think an open relationship concept is a cop out, and people are, for some reason, there's a lack of awareness because eventually somebody makes a choice and somebody's not happy with the circumstances. It's no different than a situationship or the like. Eventually, more is required from one party to the other, and someone's going to have to give and either relinquish themselves to the circumstances or decide it does not work anymore.
So, Made in Luxury, thank you for turning your mic on and sharing. So, if I heard you correctly, bit of a cop out. Somebody's going to have to make a decision, very much like a situationship. And I will summarize and use my own words, Made in Luxury, if that's okay. That trying to think how to formulate my thoughts here. Um, Things might not be as balanced um, based on what you were describing, if I heard you correctly.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Okay. I'm I'm a little biased because I have no, because I have a personal conviction about it, right? And that I have to put on the lens of a therapist, right? So I could speak from like different perspectives if that's okay. Um, from a therapeutic lens, I don't believe in making decisions for people, right? So I think that we have to explore the consequences, but I guess that's where my personal conviction comes in, right? Because I would use those to help guide or facilitate a thought process or decision making process based on patterns or attachment needs or what I've seen just based on my experience when working with couples, right? Um, I have in the past brought up two couples having third or fourth parties in the mix. What does that look like, and how do you protect yourselves from getting hurt, whether it's emotionally or physically, right? Because if rules are governing other parties, we have to think of health risks as well, in addition to the mental health aspect of it, right? Do I feel like I'm getting enough from a particular person? Am I okay with sharing this type of love or this relationship? right? So my personal conviction is I think simplest is best, but that's also kind of like my philosophy speaking. Um, I think trying not to work harder than you need to is a good thing just because of stress levels and quality of life. Um, but you guys are probably familiar with the show. Oh my gosh, what is it called now? Something like Multiple Wives. And this gentleman has like five wives and it plays on TLC. And you can see the dynamic playing out where one person feels more connected or attached to the husband than the other, right? And I think based on what Made in Luxury is saying, sorry, I'm not sure of your names. So I'm going to refer to you that way. I apologize.
Or
Kevin.
sister wives.
I'm Sister Wives. Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. And your name is?
It's Kevin.
Oh, thank you, Kevin. That's an easy one to remember. It's my brother's name. Based on what Kevin was saying, if I can refer to that, I think at some point we start competing. But I think that's just human nature. Not trying to be cynical, just based on my experience. So yeah, I think it's a tough one when it comes to a contract, but I would say, simple is best. And then I would throw my theology in there as well, in terms of the
I was
union
just
between,
about to say that. Yeah.
right? From a theological perspective, I have to subscribe to my belief and my value system. And I think, two is a covenant, and, third party could be a crowd if I can use that language. So, yeah. I will continue if that's okay with
Go for
everybody.
it.
Just being mindful of time as well, but I do enjoy the discussion, so thank you. We're talking about broken integrity. Are my values being preserved, whether it's at home or with work spouse? Is there a level of transparency? Is there trust and honesty and open communication? Am I okay if my partner does that because I'm doing it? Um, can this be harmful to myself or others, whether it's short term or long term, right? Are we thinking of the cognitive implications that I keep thinking about this person and I'm ruminating? And then if the relationship dissolves, implications, am I missing this person? And that's impacting my primary relationship. Is this causing me stress? Am I not sleeping or eating? Is it impacting my larger social system as a result of what the relationship is doing? Am I pulling away from my friends? Am I drawing closer to my friends as a result? These are things to be thankful or to reflect on. Okay? I will move on. Work spouses and attachment needs. So my bias as a therapist is I work from an attachment framework. And really quickly, very high level, attachment needs formulate during childhood and they go on throughout the rest of our life. But what happens is we have different attachment styles that show up. And as a result of those attachment styles, which is basically secure, anxious, avoidant, and disorganized, we're not going to talk about disorganized, but secure is more about, hey, parents met all of my physical, emotional needs. They were consistent in doing that. Produces a very secure attachment style. This is the hope that everybody's secure. Everybody wants to be secure. The reality is probably not. We end up being anxious where parents are inconsistent in meeting our emotional and physical or psychological needs, ends up with an anxious attachment. I end up chasing people or pursuing them. You can develop into an avoidant attachment type, sorry, where parents, much like the avoidant, are inconsistent. However, in addition to that, they are not validating emotions. Maybe there's some abusive situations that take place. In other words, emotions become secondary or the self becomes secondary. And that's just a very high level, okay, guys? But as a result of those three attachment styles, we all have attachment needs, which is like the slide says, to feel valued and accepted and important and connected and desired and seen and feel full and appreciated, feel safe, secure, and ability to heal, and also to feel successful. And as men, feel like we're contributing to something. We all have needs. And if those attachment needs are not being met in my primary relationship, hey, I'm curious. Are you finding it at work? Food for thought. I will move on. Next slide, work spouses and attachment needs. The word emotion and the power of emotion, basically the word emotion means to move. In other words, in motion, right? No, but it is emotion. And some emotions are very powerful, powerful things. Sometimes we underrate or undervalue. Am I feeling that sense of love? Whether it is that philo love, that brotherly love, or it's that erotica love. Is this agape love, which I don't think it would be, which is, love of God, right? And a work spouse. I don't think that love is distributed equally between partner and work spouse, but that's my bias. Am I being accepted by work spouse that maybe my spouse is not accepting me? Maybe history is getting in the way and they just don't see me for, who I used to be or who I am. Is there a loss of excitement in the primary relationship at home that maybe is taking place at work or in the office? Is fear driving this? Am I so afraid to show my current partner who I am that I'm not able to show up, but it drives me to somebody else, right? So I'm not having to face that fear. Maybe it's an escape. Maybe I did something embarrassed and I can't confront, my partner, my spouse. And maybe that's what's driving it, or shame, right? These are difficult things. One thing we do in couples counseling is we have partners look at each other in the eyes. And let me tell you something, couples of like decades of together, sometimes looking in their eyes for 10 seconds is a very difficult thing to do. 10 seconds, right? Without giggling or some kind of discomfort or just something that says, whoa, I don't know, this is just new, right? So it's very difficult to look your partner in your eyes and say, hey, I did something, or I've had this thought or experience, and share that. But the inability to share that drives you towards somebody else, right? And it could be that work spouse, right? So I put on the side, they're just, questions to ask yourself as you're, reflecting on this topic. I'll continue. How does history play a role? Well, when you look at your work spouses or just, how relationships form in general, was it a bad breakup that informed me going, to somebody else? Or all relationships going to be like this? Was there that hurt from the last relationship that draws me to other people, that prevents me from speaking about the realities of the current relationship with spouse or romantic partner? Is it trauma, in my history that leads me to pursuing others because staying in this relationship and really dealing with those difficult issues becomes challenging? Was it the way moms and pops showed up? I put Zed there, guys, just, keeping it real relationships. I call my pops, just, how I did things. So, but anyways, how they raised me, was it a part of how they showed their affection? Was it how they showed conflict? Was it how they resolved conflict? Was it how they showed intimacy? Is this an accepted practice or rule, right? Hence the next one, what rules have I learned about intimacy? Is this a cultural value? I'm West Indian, so I do have a bit of a bias, and I see patterns and trends of families of generations. Is this acceptable, whether it's spoken or unspoken, right? Maybe it is okay that we have, two husbands or two wives or multiple partners, right? Just food for thought. Was there abuse, whether verbal or infidelity, that is drawing me to somebody else? Maybe you're trying to punish partner for something that happened when you first met. Maybe partner invited an ex-boyfriend in and I wasn't sure about the timeline and we were still dating and, I'm holding on to that hurt. I'm like, I'm going to get you back. And, my work spouse allows me to do that because you did it. It gives me permission to do it. But because you did it first. Right. So these are just things to ask yourself, to reflect on when we're talking about work spouses. I think we have a couple more slides left. Yep, we are at practical steps as we're going through the agenda. If anybody has any questions, once again, feel free to put it in the chat. Just closing that up. So practical steps for work spouses and even with spouse, okay? Define your relationship at home or at work. Talk about it, right? See what works, what doesn't work. Speak to your spouse or partner. It's obviously not easy. I just spoke about looking somebody in the eyes. Imagine looking somebody in the eyes and saying this and seeing the hurt and what that's like, right? Knowing that there was a contributing factor in that process. Reestablish meaningful connections, based on your values and what's important to you. Okay? Speak about acceptable rules and boundaries in your relationship, right? Whether with spouse or with work spouse. Okay? Lean into your partner, invite in some empathy, sit in each other's pain. In other words, what I'm saying is maybe inviting some active listening. Just listen. You don't got to fix anything. Sometimes just sitting in it is healing because you're validating the person's experience, their attachment needs. Um, you and your spouse probably have hurts and maybe need to talk about those, and what's going on if there's a work spouse in the mix. Seek a credible therapist. That's my bias. I had to put that out there. Someone that fits with your relationship values, cultural values, personal needs. I think that's very helpful, right? Someone who's going to be unbiased, who's not making decisions for you, who's going to guide you through this process to help you better understand yourself, right? And I think what's important for seven is, seek a bit of healing and find community to support. I would say to, a long time ago, worked with a group of men in the PAR program, really cool program. These guys would do some really hurtful things, love them to death, love them for life. And I would always say to them, guys, don't go to that friend that's going to tell you what to do. Go to the friend that's going to tell you what not to do. Okay, that's helpful community. All right. I see Jen's putting her headphones on, which means we got to wrap up soon. I use the statement when. Basically, when it's kind of corny. When you use when, I win and you win. Basically, what it is, it's an I feel statement. So it's like when you do the behavior, be careful with the word you because it's a self blame. I feel, state your emotion. Next time, can we do this together? Okay. Ask yourself, what do I need? Right? What do they need when you're talking to spouse or work spouse? And then 3 rules to healthy decision making. Here's my challenge to you before we wrap up. Try to break these rules. I have no one who's done so yet. These are my 3 rules to making a healthy decision. Am I making things bigger? If your answer is yes, unhealthy. Well, I feel good about my decision. Let's see. Let's explore that one. Well, a work spouse might make me feel helpful and healthy and feel good. Maybe my answer is yes. The last one, will my decision hurt others or myself? Well, guess what? The answer is yes, there too. And if I'm going to hurt myself or others, whether intentionally or unintentionally, which means we got to think about it, I'm probably not making a good decision. Okay, 3 rules to making healthy decisions. Moving on to the next slide. Final thoughts. One thing I like to say to my couples when I'm working with them is that it's not my responsibility to make you love me, but it's my responsibility to create an environment so you can. So you can. So you ask yourself, am I creating an environment so my spouse can love me if I have a work spouse? Is that helpful? I'm not sure. Talk to your partner. That's what we're getting at. Cool. So I guess that's essentially it in terms of our time together. Apply. I gave you guys some strategies there. Use those skills, talk to partner. When we're talking about change happens on a couple levels. The one that I'll use for this just because of time, change can happen in reality and perceived. The reality is change happens first in reality, perceived takes longer. So just because you try something once, don't give up on it. Keep doing it. Perception, it takes time for people to see things. Sometimes it can be a shock to the system. Teach. Teaching is great. Teaching is great. But as you're teaching, also be a student because great teachers are better students. So learn from your partner. Learn about what's going on. And what is one thing you will, I guess, act on this week? We'll leave that as food for thought. You hold on to that. Just being mindful of time. Jen, I'll turn it over to you in the metaverse before I show my slide.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jamie. Oh my God, so many amazing questions, so much food for thought. I am like reeling right now. I'm like, oh my God, like there's so many self-awareness and reflection questions to go back over and just to think about. Mentiverse, y'all know it is the app that we upload all of our conversations to. And so you can download it through Google Play or the App Store, and you can find all of our current and previous seasons for the relationship series. The ones from this month will be uploaded at the end of the month, and the ones from next month at the end of next month. So you can catch the replay or send me a quick email if you want the replay like right now. So that's the metaverse. If you can go to the next slide for me. Woo! I'm super excited, everybody. So thank you so much, Jamie. This is not to close because we still have about 10 minutes left. But I do want to make sure that you guys know Next week, we are going to have with us Fabian Reed. I am listening, you guys. And so we've invited clearer voices or clear voices to come and speak with us. So next week we have Fabian Reed, who is also a friend. He is an international speaker. He is a life coach. He is a social worker. He is an author. He is a pastor. He is so many things. And he is going to come and talk to us next week about our relationship topic. It is called When Church Hurts. Y'all know I am a person of faith. I grew up in church, and I know many of you have as well. And sometimes we go through things at church in our relationships that cause us to question the God that we are supposed to be learning how to serve. And so we're going to talk about that next week. We're going to come with our real stuff, our real stories. Guys, this is a place where we have transformational conversations. We could talk about the things that are really affecting our lives. And some of us are carrying, I'm going to be really honest, I carried church hurt for like over a decade. I'm talking about things that happened in my childhood that caused me to distrust God in my adulthood. And that affected my relationships. And so I want us to bring our stuff. I want us to have a foundation. I want us to have an environment where we can talk about that. And Fabian's going to lead us in that conversation next week. Super excited about that. I think I saw him sign in earlier. I'm not sure if he's still here, but we're gonna do that next week. So you guys make sure you guys are back next Thursday, 1 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern time, and other times for other places in the world if you are joining in. So come back next week for When Church Hurts with Fabian Reed, y'all.
All right, I'll move on to the next slide. And just in closing, everybody, before I put up Jen's slide, Jen, thank you for that warm introduction for Fabian for next week. Excited as well. Here's my contact information in case anybody has any questions, comments, concerns, reflections, wants to know more. Just feel free to hit me up, at these email addresses, or feel free to give us a call on these numbers. So with that said, our last slide. And here is Jen's information in case you have further questions for Jen with respect to what we spoke about today or other sessions within our series. Feel free to hit her up at, Corner Counselor as well. Clearly the IG, FB, and ME contacts are there. Feel free to use those as you use ours as well. But Jen, I will turn it over to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much again, Jamie. You are amazing. Thank you so much for being here, for delivering your heart to us as it pertains to this topic. Guys, there are so many things about today's topic that are important for us to take with us. And it's not just work, it's really any context that's passion fueled. That we meet like-minded individuals, right? I'm a coach, I'm a speaker. I find myself in conferences and at retreats, with people who have the same kind of passions as me, who are in the same field, who are in the same industry, doing the same things, and we connect on a different level, right? And there might be somebody that we're involved with that doesn't connect as much or as deeply because they're not in the same industry. They don't have the same things as we do. And so we have to really be mindful, be really careful about how we're governing ourselves. Are we remaining integral? Right? Are we allowing for maybe disagreements or dissatisfaction in our relationship to move us in a direction that we really don't want to go into murky waters, right? And so we want to make sure that we are careful and we use safety when it comes to our relationships. At the end of the day, right? We want to have quality relationships. We're here talking about it so we can revolutionize our relationships. And so we have to be honest with ourselves. And my goodness, Jamie gave us like 100 self-reflection questions where we can be honest with ourselves, about what's really in our hearts. And some of them hit home for me because yeah, I have a lot of things to continue to work through. So thank you so much again, Jamie, for all of it. And you guys know you can get the recording. I do have a question in the chat that I want you to address, Jamie, before we close.
Sure.
And it's from Becky. It says, what is the difference between work spouses and having a work spouse and dating coworkers? Is it even an established relationship or a passive one? So that's from Becky. And yeah, maybe giving some distinctions or some nuances or maybe parameters around, how one shifts into the other or what have you.
Yeah, no, I'm taking in the question, Becky. Thank you so much for your question. So I'm just going to reread it again from the chat as Jen said it, just so I can kind of like internalize and put the proper attention to the question. So,
Okay,
what is the difference between a work spouse and dating a coworker? Um, well, I think, like Jen had alluded to, we have to define, what is a work spouse, and then what is a dating relationship. Um, I think maybe the rules could be a little bit different, but then the outcome could be a little bit different in terms of the intention behind it. Maybe I think both are going to have unspoken rules, but I think the unspoken rules about a dating relationship are going to be different than the unspoken rules with a work spouse. For example, if you think of intimacy, I'm not sure if a work spouse relationship is going to lead to intimacy, right? That might not be a thing,
mm,
or that might be an unspoken line that we don't cross. Where dating a coworker, well, maybe sex or that level of intimacy and longevity in a relationship is there present. But once again, it's unspoken, right? But once again, I think there's a lot of blurred lines there, right? Because you can have a work spouse that transitions into a dating a coworker, right? And that could just be the progression of that relationship. Or who knows, maybe it works in reverse and you dated the person and you're like, well, I don't dig you this way. And then it just ends up going to a work spouse relationship, right? So once again, I think it becomes boundaries and what's defined in terms of those relationships, in terms of what's spoken or unspoken. The second part of it is it even an established relationship or a passive one? I think that
mm.
depends on the people that are involved in the relationship and how we're addressing it, right? So I know that's not a direct answer, but I think I'm always going to give it back to the couple in terms of what they decide or what they define as the relationship, right? Whether it's passive or maybe more active in terms of the acceptable or unacceptable behaviors, right? And then whether it's these behaviors are shown publicly or not. So that'd be my thoughts on it. If we are talking about a work spouse and you are in a relationship and then you're dating a coworker with a spouse, well, I think we're talking about infidelity, right?
Yeah,
Just based on the
call
definition
it
of
what it is.
explicit, right? I would call it that, right? But your question didn't. I don't think it stated that the person you're conceptualizing or thinking about has a partner. That's just my interpretation. But Becky, I hope I put some thought and effort and energy to that question.
Thank you, Jamie and Jen. The reason I ask is because I just have this thing when I go into a workplace is that I already have it in my head that you don't like
Date
have
people that you work with.
you don't date a coworker. So like
Yeah.
I, I was just wondering like is it a good thing or a bad thing? Because then I would just go in there like avoidant, like what Jen was saying, like no, I don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's very uncomfortable. It's just messy, and it's something like I don't do. So it's like I'm thinking about the work spouse, and I remember from home, I was cutting my head off the what happened at work, and I was like, it's just because I don't get close to people at work. Maybe like that having that work spouse where you talk things out about work, and then when you go home, it's like home.
Yeah. No, I
Yeah,
think,
absolutely.
yeah.
Ooh.
Jen, is it okay if I share something?
Yes, and just to let you know, we have a hand up. Kevin put his hand up
Sure.
real quick. We
Okay.
have a few more minutes left.
Yep.
So go
I'm
ahead.
I'm okay to go over by a couple of minutes if others are, and if you are as well, Jen.
Perfect. Yeah.
So with respect to what Becky is saying too, like um, we have to factor in culture and context, right? So like, you think of people of a generation, right, might be more inclined to have work spouses than other just based on common generational rules. Or, maybe there's cultural values that show up. I know for myself, when I was younger, I heard those messages, you don't date people at work. You keep work and personal life separate. Doesn't mean that plays out in reality, though, sometimes, right?
Right.
But then you're also thinking about context depending on where you are in the world. Maybe it's more acceptable to mingle or connect in these environments rather than in a different cultural or geographical setting. But Jen, I had cut you off earlier. I apologize for that.
No worries, no worries. Oh, I didn't even realize my mic was on at the time. But yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Context and culture matters when it comes to this particular topic and how it plays out in work environments. Not everybody has, like an office space or, works in a factory or a building or, whatever have you. So we do have to take that into consideration. And that's why I was saying, sometimes it matters sorry, sometimes it really refers to like the industry that you're in, or even um, you know, the kind of education that you have, right? Because I mean, I work in an industry, I don't work directly with other coaches and therapists and speakers and whatnot, but we find ourselves, in particular contexts. And so if I meet somebody there, that understands me better than my spouse who is not in the same industry, that could begin to breed, that those kinds of thoughts and ideas and feelings if I'm open to it. But if I have a hard stop and it's a boundary in my life, and I'm like, yeah, I don't even entertain advances from anybody at work or in the same industry as me, anyways, then that can mitigate against any potential risks or chances of getting into any kind of relationship that might be considered um, infidelity or an emotional affair or anything, risky. Um, but I don't know if I don't know if Kevin's still here. He had his hand up. Kevin, did you still have a question?
No, you guys
Oh,
tackled in your responses.
all righty. Yeah, so this is great.
Context matters. That's essentially
Context matters. What was your thought on that?
it. Gentleman definitely he parlayed it pretty much the way I would. And culture, um, and and one's set of thoughts before entering that possibility, it matters. You know, where someone would say, "Oh yeah, I don't date anybody at work." Well, quite frankly, that's probably where you spend a greater portion of your time
Right,
and people around you. So if you're single and you're entering a work relationship, or you're open to relationship, you're going to relate to the people that relate to you. So
right,
it's difficult to completely shut that door
right.
in certain contexts, as you mentioned.
Yeah,
Um, and then otherwise, like the prior statement is, work spouse would innately mean that you're already involved with someone else, and
exactly.
thus, the two are separate in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the term work spouse to me is just so disrespectful. Because in my mind, I'm like, it means you're making a distinction. Like, do I have a church spouse? Do I have like a at-home spouse? Do I have like a school spouse? Do I have like a library spouse? Like what are we doing here? You understand? So that's my bias. See all that coming out. But I'm gonna be real with it because I mean, with clients, sure, you guys are free, they're free to do whatever they want. But when it comes to me, I'm like, I don't know. Let's really delve into that a little bit more. Um, because I just feel like if I'm your wife, there's only one wife. Like there's only one of me. There's no comparison. There's no other. There's no next. There's no nothing. So, work friend, colleague, work partner in the project that you guys are doing, you can name it a whole bunch of things, but spouse, yeah, no, don't disrespect me. Um, so Timotheus Timbo has a question, has a hand up. Sorry, hold on, guys. You know what I'm gonna do? Just for the sake of maintaining our integrity as it pertains to time, I'm gonna close this out and I'm gonna keep our line open, but I'm gonna shut down the recording so that the recording is not more than an hour. Okay.